She told me parking was difficult, that she'd be a few minutes late. I believed her. 45 minutes later, I realized she was never coming. It was the third time. But what happened next, inside that same building, changed everything about my life. He got stood up at his own wedding, for the third time. But instead of leaving, he married a complete stranger sitting next to him. And what they uncovered after that was far bigger than heartbreak. She looked at me for one long second. Then she said very evenly, "That answer is banned." I leaned against the counter and kept chopping the onion because looking at the onion was easier than looking at her. "It isn't banned. It is in this kitchen. I didn't realize your kitchen had constitutional authority. It does when people are lying in it." I let out a breath. Not a dramatic one. Just the tired kind. The kind your body produces when it knows it has been caught using an old trick. She wiped her hands on a towel and waited. That was another thing about Simone. She didn't peck at a wound. She didn't circle it theatrically. She just stood there with the patience of someone who understood that if the truth was going to come out, it needed enough room to stop hiding. Finally, I said, "Your mother called this arrangement temporary on Sunday." She didn't speak. So I kept going. "And you said, we'll revisit everything in November." I set the knife down. "I know you were trying to keep the conversation simple. I know your mother was doing what she does. I know this is technically what we agreed to." I looked at her then. But hearing you say it like that, I paused. It made me feel like a lease. Her face changed immediately. Not defensive. Hurt. And I knew the second I saw it that she hadn't meant it the way I heard it. Which was almost worse. Because unintentional pain is harder to be angry at. "I didn't mean it that way," she said quietly. "I know." "That doesn't help, does it?" "No." She nodded once. A small, tight nod. The kind you do when the thing you hoped was manageable has just become real. I rubbed a hand over my mouth. "It isn't just that," I said. "It's the whole shape of this now." "What shape?" I laughed once. Softly. Not because it was funny. Because I didn't know how else to begin. "The shape where I don't know whether I get to want things." Her eyes stayed on me. Focused. Still. So I said it. Actually said it. The thing I had spent months trying to phrase in quieter, safer language. I don't know how to live inside a marriage where I'm constantly trying not to scare the other person by wanting it to be real. Silence. The stove hissed softly behind us. A car horn sounded somewhere on the street below. A normal Chicago night carrying on with its own business while my life stood in a kitchen, trying for once not to hide behind good manners. I swallowed. Then added, "And I know that sounds unfair because this began exactly the way it began and nobody forced me into it. But somewhere along the way this stopped being administrative for me." I looked at the cutting board. At the half-diced onion. At my own hands. I think it stopped being administrative for me a while ago. When I finally looked up, Simone had gone very still. Not rigid. Just intensely present. Like every part of her attention had moved to one place. "I need you to say the rest," she said. I almost smiled. Because there it was again. That exact quality. No melodrama. No rescue. No way out through vagueness. "You know the rest. I want to hear whether you do." That landed. Because she was right. Knowing what you feel and being willing to place it in the air are not the same act. I took a breath. Then another. And said, "I love you." There it was. No swelling music. No rain against the windows. No cinematic miracle. Just a man in a kitchen with onion on his fingers and a tightness in his throat, finally saying the most obvious true thing in his life. "I love you," I repeated, because once wasn't enough. And I am too old and frankly too tired to keep pretending I would be equally happy with a yearly review and a neutral tone. She stared at me. For a second I genuinely couldn't read her face. Then she laughed once. A strange sound. Sharp and breathless and a little disbelieving. Not at me. At herself. At the situation. At the fact that the universe, with all its available methods, had apparently chosen this one. She put both hands flat on the counter and looked down. When she spoke, her voice was lower. "I need a moment. Because if I answer too fast, you will think I rehearsed this, and I very much did not. Despite everything, that nearly made me smile. So I waited. She lifted her head. I said that to my mother because if I had said what was true, I would have had to hear it out loud. My chest tightened. What is true? She held my gaze. That I don't want to revisit everything in November. The room went very quiet. Or maybe I just stopped hearing the rest of it. She came around the counter, slowly. Not performing softness. Just choosing closeness instead of distance. And when she stood in front of me, she did something I had seen her do only a handful of times. She let herself look unguarded. Completely. I have spent most of my adult life believing that clarity comes first, and feeling can be trusted second, she said. Terms, conditions, defined risk, exit routes. That is how I have survived a number of things, and some of it is useful and some of it is just armor with a law degree. One side of my mouth moved. She noticed. Do not make me funnier than I am during this part. Sorry. She reached for my hand. I proposed a 1-year arrangement because it was the only way I could imagine stepping into something enormous without letting it devour me. Her fingers tightened around mine. And somewhere in the middle of all this, you became home in a way I did not authorize. That hit me harder than almost anything anyone had ever said. Maybe because it sounded exactly like her. Not polished. Not ornamental. True in her own language. I wake up better when you are here, she said. When something strange happens, you are who I want to tell. When I buy groceries, I think about whether you are out of the tea you like. When I come back from a long day, my body relaxes if your shoes are by the door. She paused. Then more quietly. So no. I do not want to revisit everything in November. I want November to happen and then keep happening after that. I don't remember deciding to kiss her. I just remember that one moment we were standing in her kitchen saying the quietest brutal truths of our lives, and the next moment her hand was at the back of my neck, and mine were around her waist, and everything in me that had been braced for departure found, instead, arrival. It wasn't a movie kiss. It wasn't perfect. I think I still smelled like onion. But it was honest. And at 41, honesty begins to matter more than polish. We burned the onions. That part feels important to include because otherwise the moment sounds too well lit. By the time we separated and both looked vaguely stunned, the pan had gone far enough that dinner became salvageable in theory and unwise in practice. We ordered takeout. Sat on the floor of her living room because neither of us felt equal to table manners. And somewhere between the dumplings and the second glass of wine, the conversation shifted from confession into consequence. What do we do now? I asked. She sat cross-legged with her plate, balanced carefully in one hand. About what specifically? This. I made a small gesture between us. The fact that we are no longer pretending this is only a structured response to mutual catastrophe. She considered that. Then said, we stop hiding behind vocabulary. That's broad. It is accurate. I smiled. Meaning I stop saying things like arrangement when I mean relationship. And I stop saying things like fine when I mean terrified. That would be useful, yes. I looked at her. At the woman I had met in a plastic chair because both our lives had come unstitched in the same government building. Are you scared? I asked. Of course. Of what? She took a sip of wine. Then answered, with the kind of precision that told me she had already asked herself the question. That we began in a way no sane person would recommend. That when the story is this strange, people assume the ending must either justify it or punish it, that normal life may be less forgiving than crisis was. I nodded slowly. Anything else? She met my eyes. That I have come to care for you enough to be damaged if I lose you. There are moments when language doesn't need improvement. That was one of them. So I just said, me too. The months that followed were the most ordinary, extraordinary period of my life. And I mean that exactly. Not extraordinary because every day contained drama. The opposite. Because the days began, quietly, to resemble a life. I moved more of my things into her apartment one careful load at a time. Not in one symbolic rush. A winter coat, first. Then books. Then the good skillet from my place because she claimed mine heated more evenly. Then a second drawer in the dresser. Then the lamp from my bedroom that she said made reading at night feel less clinical. The toothbrush had already been there for months. But there is a difference between a toothbrush and a life. A toothbrush says I may stay. A lamp says I expect to. We learned the small frictions. She liked the dishwasher loaded in a way that treated geometry as moral law. I stacked things in practical clusters she considered offensive. I woke early and needed 15 quiet minutes before conversation. She woke alert and could discuss municipal corruption before sunrise if sufficiently caffeinated. She ironed almost nothing. I ironed far too much. She believed every room should have one object that served no purpose except beauty. I believed beauty was an acceptable purpose but resented dusting it. We did not merge seamlessly. This mattered, because what grew between us wasn't fantasy. It was negotiated reality. A Thursday night grocery run. A disagreement about whether the blue duvet was restful or depressing. Her taking my car for an oil change because she noticed I was at 12% life capacity and would otherwise postpone it 3 weeks. Me setting up automatic bill reminders on her father's tablet after he called twice in 1 month, convinced it had been hacked, when really, he'd just forgotten his password again. Life. Actual life. And because it was actual life, it contained one of the strangest experiences I have ever had. Watching our families adjust. My mother took the longest. Not because she disapproved exactly. Because she had spent decades building a very Midwestern respect for the orderly sequence of things, and her middle son appearing with an accidental wife and a federal-adjacent investigation had not been among the outcomes she had pre-approved. The first dinner she hosted for us in Elmhurst had the atmosphere of a woman trying very hard not to treat her own dining room like a customs checkpoint. She made pot roast. My father opened wine he normally saved for Christmas. Paul arrived early because of course he did. Rebecca brought both children, which in retrospect was helpful because small children destroy formality simply by existing at full volume. Simone handled it all with extraordinary grace. She brought flowers for my mother. Actually listened to my father's story about zoning disputes in DuPage County. Let my niece braid one side of her hair while continuing a conversation with Rebecca about hospital billing systems. And then, at one point, I came back from the kitchen and found Simone and Paul standing near the back door, both holding beers, deep in conversation. Paul looked up as I approached. Then, with the calm of a man choosing to detonate something gently, he said, "I like her." I stared at him. "You've spoken to her 4 times. "I only need one for most people." Simone raised an eyebrow. "Is that supposed to be reassuring?" "It means you're efficient." She laughed. Paul took a sip of his beer, then glanced at me and said, "Also, for the record, if you mess this one up, I am siding with her." "Thank you," I said. "You are welcome." Later that night, after everyone left and my mother had done that thing where she hugs you a fraction too long because she is trying to communicate several unsayable emotions through upper body pressure, I sat in the passenger seat while Simone drove us back to the city. The road was dark. The heater was too warm. My body had that strange, emptied-out feeling good family gatherings can produce. Not exhaustion exactly. More like emotional weather had passed through. "Well?" she asked, eyes on the road. "Well what? Did I survive induction into the Cole family?" "You did more than survive." Paul made an allegiance joke. She smiled faintly. I gathered that was meaningful. "It is. It's basically blood oath behavior for him." She was quiet for a second. Then she said, "Your mother looked worried in the beginning." She was. And at the end, I thought about it. The flowers in the vase. My father walking Simone to the door. My mother pressing leftovers into our hands with slightly unnecessary firmness. "At the end," I said. She looked relieved. Simone nodded once. Then after a beat, "Mine are getting there." Her parents were more complicated. Not hostile. Not exactly. But deeply suspicious of any structure in which their brilliant daughter had married a stranger in the wake of public humiliation and then calmly kept him. Her mother, Adeza, had the kind of formidable intelligence that made simple questions feel like cross-examination. Her father, Tunde, was quieter. An architect who listened so carefully it could make you feel underlined. The first real dinner at their house in Hyde Park was, for me, an exercise in controlled respiration. Their home was beautiful. Clean lines. Books everywhere. Art that made you stand straighter without knowing why. Adeza served jollof rice, fish, and a salad. I spent half the evening complimenting, because it seemed safer than speaking freely. Tunde asked thoughtful, devastatingly calm questions. About my work. About how I understood responsibility. About whether I believed a life could be built backward from accident. That last one nearly made me choke on my water. I answered honestly. "I don't know that it can be built backward," I said. "I think maybe it can be built from the point where 2 people decide to stop pretending an accident is the only thing holding them there." He considered that. Then nodded, once. Across the table, Simone did not look at me, which is how I knew the answer had mattered to her. Later, while Adeze wrapped leftovers with the grim efficiency of a woman who had not yet decided whether to trust me, but fully intended to feed me regardless, Tunde found me alone near the bookshelves. He picked up a small ceramic object from the mantel, turned it once in his hands, then said, "My daughter does not do anything halfway. Even her mistakes are meticulously constructed." I smiled carefully. "That tracks." He looked at me then. Not severe, just direct. What she did was impulsive in form, he said, but not in character, which means she saw something. I did not know what to say to that, so I said the only true thing available. I hope she did. He set the ceramic piece down. I think, he said, that perhaps you both did. That stayed with me. Not because it solved anything, because it named something I had not fully accepted yet. That what happened between us was not randomness alone. Chance put us in the same room. Choice kept us there. In April, Huang called. By then, months had passed since our first meeting. Long enough that the investigation had become part of the background architecture of life. Not forgotten. Never that. But integrated. A folder on a shelf. An occasional secure email. A thing that could still rearrange a week without warning, but no longer consumed every day. I was at work when Simone texted. Can you leave by 5? Not emergency, just yes or no. I wrote back. Yes. Then I spent the next 2 hours working with that particular kind of divided attention, where your body remains in one place, and your nervous system has already gone elsewhere. When I got to her apartment, she was sitting at the table in silence. Not legal pad silence. Worse. Still silence. The kind that meant the facts had already arrived, and she was waiting for her body to catch up. I set my bag down. What's happened? She looked up. Huang wants me to meet Raymond. I stood there a second, then sat down slowly. In person. Yes? Why? He reached out through an intermediary. Claims he wants to correct the record. He asked specifically for me. That sounds terrible. It does. She folded her hands. The Bureau thinks he may be trying to assess what I know, or manage exposure. If he's careless, they may get something useful. I looked at her. The muscles in my shoulders had already tightened. When? Next week. Do you have to? Her eyes stayed on mine. No. That answer surprised me more than if she had said yes. No. No. Huang was clear about that. They can ask. They cannot require. There are other routes. I nodded. Too fast. My mind had already split into separate tracks. Fear. Anger. Practical calculation. The memory of departure. The image of an airport call and a man who had treated her life like staging ground. What do you want to do? I asked. She looked away briefly, then back. I haven't decided. That should have been simple. But it wasn't. Because somewhere inside me, old reflexes were waking up. Take the time you need. Whatever works for you. I don't want to pressure you. All the phrases a certain kind of man learns so well that they begin to sound like virtue, even when they're partly made of fear. I could feel them lining up behind my teeth. Ready. Familiar. Polite. And because I could feel them, I knew I had a choice. A real one. Maybe one of the first, truly clean ones of my life. Simone must have seen something in my face, because she said softly, Nathan. I met her eyes. If you don't want me to do this, she said, say it plainly. Do not offer me a beautifully worded absence. That nearly undid me. Because she knew. Of course she knew. She had learned the shape of my self-erasure as thoroughly as I had learned the cadence of her guardedness. I stared at the table for a second. Then I said, I don't want you to do it. The room changed the moment I said it. Not because she looked trapped. Because I didn't. I didn't feel noble. I didn't feel manipulative. I felt honest. And honesty, I was learning, has a physical sensation when you are not used to it. It feels like standing up inside your own life. She exhaled, slowly. Because you think it's a bad idea? Yes. And? I swallowed. Because if she was asking for plainness, then plainness was the price. And because I am scared. She said nothing. So I kept going. I am scared of him. I am scared of what he represents. I am scared of anything that puts you in a room with someone who has already proven he can separate charm from damage. And I know there would be people around and precautions and all the sensible things. I know that. I looked at her fully. But emotionally, I am just scared. She sat very still, then nodded once. Thank you. It took me a second to understand the tone. Not relief exactly. Gratitude. For the truth. Not the answer itself. The truth inside it. I haven't decided yet, she said. But thank you for not disappearing into generosity. I smiled faintly. High bar. For you, maybe not. We talked for an hour. Not in circles. Not trying to win. Actually talked. She was angry at Raymond in a way that had gone beyond heartbreak and settled into moral clarity. Not loud anger. Not dramatic. The kind that wants witness. The kind that wants the person who did the damage to sit still and know for once exactly what it cost. Part of her wanted the meeting for that reason. Not revenge. Completion. Another part of her, the disciplined part, understood risk. By the end of the hour, she had made her choice. "I'll do it," she said, "but only under their terms. Public place, full surveillance, no improvisation." I leaned back in the chair. Every muscle in me disliked this, but dislike and respect are allowed to coexist. "Okay," I said. She watched me. "You don't have to like it." "I don't. But I married a woman who knows the difference between fear and instruction." One corner of her mouth lifted. "That may be the most romantic thing you've ever said." "That is deeply unfortunate." She reached across the table and took my hand. The meeting took place in a hotel bar on Michigan Avenue that had probably hosted 1,000 false reconciliations and confidential betrayals before ours ever entered the room. I wasn't allowed in. That was the agreement. Simone went in wearing a navy coat and a face so composed it almost frightened me. Wang's team was already positioned. They had briefed us both in exhausting detail. What would happen? What would not happen? What signals mattered? What exit routes existed? How long the meeting would run before intervention if necessary? I understood all of it. And still, I hated every second. I waited in a coffee shop across the street, because that was the closest I was permitted to be without becoming part of the problem. I bought a coffee I did not drink. Sat by the window. Watched the revolving door of the hotel. Every time a woman in a dark coat emerged, my heart made its own terrible decision before my brain corrected it. An hour passed, limpid like a test of structural integrity. Then my phone buzzed. One line. Done. "I'm okay." I stood so fast I nearly hit the table. By the time I got outside, she was already at the corner, hands in her pockets, walking toward me with that particular tension people carry after prolonged controlled contact with someone they once loved and now understand more fully. I crossed half the block before I realized I was practically jogging. When I reached her, I didn't ask anything intelligent. I just put my arms around her. On a downtown sidewalk. In front of strangers. Without caring even a little. For a second, she stayed still. Then she leaned into me with the full weight of a person who had spent an hour holding herself together for public purposes and had now reached the place she could let go. "I'm okay," she said into my coat. "I know. No, I mean really, I'm okay." I nodded into her hair. After a moment, she pulled back. Her face looked pale, not fragile. Resolved. We walked in silence until we found a quieter street. Then she told me. Raymond had tried charm first. Of course he had. Remorse with clean edges. The language of context. Misunderstanding. Pressure. You don't know what was happening on my side. I made mistakes, but not the ones you're being told. All of it. Then when she didn't soften, he'd shifted. Gotten irritated. Not overtly. Just enough for the mask to move. Enough for the underlying entitlement to show. He said things like, "You always did need everything documented." As though her rigor had been some exhausting preference rather than the reason he was now sitting in a monitored hotel bar trying not to incriminate himself. And eventually, because arrogant men often believe precision is a bluff, he said too much. Not a full confession. Life is rarely that tidy. But enough. Enough to confirm knowledge of the shell companies. Enough to suggest he had chosen proximity to her partly because of her work. Enough to make clear that, while genuine affection may have entered somewhere along the way, it had never outranked utility. When she said that last part, her voice didn't break. That almost made it worse. I asked him one question at the end, she said. "What?" She looked straight ahead as we waited at a crosswalk. I asked whether any of it had been real to him. I felt something clench in my chest. What did he say? The light changed. We started walking again. He said, "It got real in inconvenient places." I shut my eyes briefly. That's a monstrous sentence. Yes. She was quiet for a few steps. Then added, "I think he believed it was honest." That was the thing about people like Raymond. They don't always think of themselves as liars. Sometimes they think of themselves as sophisticated enough to hold exploitation and feeling in the same hand and call the mixture complexity. I reached for her hand. She let me. We walked the next 3 blocks without speaking. At her building, before we went inside, she stopped, looked at me, then said, "I thought about you the entire time." During the meeting? Yes. Why? She gave a short, astonished laugh. Because you are the person I wanted to be with when it was over. I don't remember the elevator ride. I don't remember unlocking the apartment. I remember the feeling. The enormous, grounding, almost unbearable feeling of being chosen in real time. Not after a speech. Not after an ultimatum. After difficulty. Which I would later understand was the whole point. Anyone can sound sincere in anticipation. The real measure happens after the room gets hard. A week later, Priya asked if we could meet. I almost said no. Not out of cruelty. Out of fatigue. By then I had done months of paperwork and quiet reevaluation and one hotel bar adjacent emotional near collapse. My appetite for returning to old wreckage was not strong. But closure is one of those words people misuse. They treat it like a door you either close or leave open forever. Really, it is usually just one more honest conversation than you wanted to have. So I agreed. We met in a coffee shop near Northwestern. Midday. Neutral territory. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. In certainty. There are ways shame reduces a person without changing any measurable dimension. She stood when I arrived. Said my name. I sat down. There was no script for this. No noble version. No efficient one. So we began where people often do when the story has outrun the language. With coffee orders and weather and one full minute of mutual uselessness. Finally, Priya put both hands around her cup and said, "I am sorry." I nodded. She shook her head. "No. Please don't do that thing where you make it easier for me by accepting the framework before I've earned it." I almost smiled despite myself. That recognizable? To me, yes. She looked tired. Not manipulated, tired. Soul tired. "I have replayed that day so many times," she said. "Not because I think replaying it changes anything, because part of me still cannot believe I became the person who sent that text." I stared at the table. Then said, "You did." "I know." Silence. Then after a moment, "I wasn't part of what Raymond was doing. Not knowingly. I need you to believe that, even if you never forgive me for anything else." "I do believe it." She closed her eyes briefly. "Thank you." I waited. She opened them again. In the weeks before the ceremony, I was already unraveling. Not because of you, that part is important. There were things at work that felt wrong. Requests that made no sense. Reviews happening out of sequence. Names being pulled twice. Access logs with explanations that sounded official and left me cold anyway. She swallowed. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then I told myself I was being stressed. Then I told myself I was just overwhelmed by the wedding and my family and expectations and everything else. But underneath all of that was a much uglier truth. What truth? She met my eyes. That I didn't trust myself enough to distinguish danger from commitment. That sat there between us. Heavy because it was honest. I kept trying to separate the pieces, she said. Work fear over here. Wedding fear over here. Your kindness over here. My family's expectations over here. But it all became one thing in my body. One giant pressure system. And instead of facing it like an adult, I panicked. I let that in slowly. Because anger likes villains. And this was not a villain sitting across from me. Just a flawed person who had failed me at the worst possible moment. Which is a much more ordinary and difficult category. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. Because telling you would have made it real before I had language. Because I was ashamed. Because some part of me believed, if I could just get one more week, I would suddenly become the woman I had promised to be. She looked down. Then back up. And because I knew even then that if I told you how confused I was, you would try to make room for it. You always made room. There it was again. The pattern from outside me. Visible to other people long before I knew how to see it myself. She gave a small, broken laugh. "I used to think that was one of the best things about you. And now I think it made it too easy for people to borrow against your steadiness." I didn't answer right away. Because she wasn't wrong. And because hearing the truth from someone who had benefited from it made it land differently. She took a breath. Then said, "Are you happy?" The question surprised me. I looked at her. "That's a strange question." "I know. Why ask it?" Her face softened. Because for the first time since I sat down, there was no defense in it. No self-protection. Only simple curiosity edged with regret. Because if I hurt you, and all I ever know after that is the hurt, then I become a permanent witness only to damage. I would like to know if it's true that something good happened after me. I thought of Simone in the kitchen. Simone at my mother's table. Simone on the sidewalk after the hotel bar. Simone reaching for my hand without checking first whether the gesture could be justified. And I answered honestly. "Yes," I said. "I am." Priya nodded. Tears gathered in her eyes but did not fall. "Good," she said. "Good. We never became friends after that. Life is not required to be that symmetrical." But we left the coffee shop lighter than we entered. And sometimes that is enough. By late summer, Huang's calls became less frequent. The case was moving where cases move. Into filings. Interviews and negotiations I was not important enough to witness, and Raymond was indicted. Others were too. A few names I'd never heard and a few I wished I never had. The details stopped belonging to my personal life and started belonging to a machinery larger than me. That was a relief. I had been living too long inside the overlap between romance and evidence. I was ready for the state to take back its own paperwork. And with that external noise beginning to recede, November started approaching in a different way. Not as a deadline, as a mirror. You could feel it coming. The date itself had no legal force beyond whatever we'd privately assigned it. But human beings are creatures of symbol whether we admit it or not. 1 year mattered because 1 year had once been the maximum imaginable promise. The first week of October, Simone asked if we could keep the anniversary Tuesday clear. "Anniversary," I said. "We are not using worse language simply because it began weirdly." "Fair. I have something in mind." "What kind of something?" She looked at me over the rim of her mug. "If I tell you now, it becomes vulnerable to your anticipatory overthinking." "I don't overthink." She just waited. "Okay," I said. "I overthink with excellent diction." "That's better." So I let it be. Or rather, I attempted to let it be. Mostly I failed quietly. I wondered whether she was planning a dinner, a conversation, a presentation with bullet points, a ceremonial dissolution, or something even more Simone-like, and therefore impossible to predict. She gave nothing away, which under ordinary circumstances I might have found charming. Under anniversary circumstances, it was maddening. By the second week of November, I had become a person who interpreted the placement of a grocery receipt as possible emotional evidence. On the Monday before the date, Paul called. "How bad is it?" he asked without preamble. "How bad is what?" "Your face." "I can't see it, but I can hear it." I smiled, despite myself. "Apparently I am being mysterious. Anniversary handled." "By your wife?" "Yes." He whistled softly. "Terrifying." "Thank you. Have you considered asking her directly?" "That feels weak. That feels sane." I leaned back in my chair. "I don't think she's leaving." "That's good." "I also don't think I know what she wants." Paul was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Do you know what you want?" That should have been easy. It wasn't. Not because I didn't know. Because saying it plainly still felt like walking onto ice I had spent years assuming would crack. "Yes," I said finally. "And? I want the kind of life where I stop acting surprised every time someone stays." There was a pause. Then in a softer voice than usual, Paul said, "Well, that seems overdue." Tuesday came cold and bright. Chicago doing that late fall thing where the light looks clean enough to hurt. Simone was already up when I woke. Her side of the bed empty. The apartment warm. The smell of coffee moving down the hall. I got dressed more carefully than I needed to. Gray suit. Not the same one. I could not do that to my nervous system, but close enough that I knew the association was there. When I walked into the kitchen, she looked up and smiled. And for one irrational second, I loved her so much it made me almost angry. Because strong feeling has a way of resembling irritation when it has nowhere else to go. "Why are you in a suit?" she asked. "You told me to keep the day clear." I decided formality was safer. "Interesting theory. You didn't tell me what the day involved." "You'll live." She slid a mug toward me. Then, with the calm of a woman discussing weather, said, "We're leaving at 10:30. "4? "You'll see." At 10:15, my pulse had become a separate administrative issue. At 10:30, we got in a cab. Downtown. Loop. Federal buildings. County offices. By the time the cab turned onto the familiar street, I felt the blood leave my face. She looked over. "You've gone pale. You brought me back here." "Yes." The Cook County Clerk's office rose ahead of us with all the bureaucratic charm I remembered. Same block. Same grayness. Same slightly apologetic architecture. My hands were cold. Simone paid the cab. Then said, "Parking would have been terrible." I stared at her. She didn't smile. Not yet. Just watched me with that unreadable, attentive face she used when something mattered too much for performance. And all at once the callback landed so hard I had to look away. Because the body keeps records, language thinks it has filed. I had not expected that. The sidewalk. The entrance. The exact angle of the glass doors. For a second, I was not standing there with Simone 1 year later. I was back inside the old humiliation. The folder. The waiting. The understanding arriving in pieces. She saw it happen. Of course she did. Her voice softened immediately. Nathan. I nodded once. Couldn't speak. She stepped closer. Not to rescue. Just to be near. We can leave, she said. Right now. No discussion. No consequence. I looked at the building again. Then at her. And the strangest thing was this. I didn't want to leave. I wanted a different ending in the exact same place. Why are we here? I asked. She reached into her bag. Pulled out an envelope. Handed it to me. Inside was a certified copy of our marriage certificate. Freshly requested. And clipped behind it, a reservation confirmation for a private room at a restaurant that evening. 12 guests. Immediate family only. Below that, a short type note in her very precise formatting. No yearly review. No provisional language. No exit strategy disguised as sophistication. If you want this, I want to stand in the place where we accidentally became married, and then go tell the people we love that I am choosing you on purpose. I read it twice. Then a third time, because my eyes had gone unreliable. When I looked up, she was watching me very carefully. I came in last week and got the copy, she said. I wanted today to contain the original fact, not replace it. I do not want a second marriage. I want the first one acknowledged correctly. My throat tightened so fast it hurt. She took a breath. Then more quietly. Also, I thought if I asked you somewhere else, part of both of us would always leave this room unfinished. There are people who understand romance as spectacle. Flowers. Strings. Perfect timing. Simone, as it turned out, understood romance as structural honesty. Go back to the wound. Stand in it together. Tell the truth there. That was her version. And it was so exactly the right one for me that I almost laughed through the pressure in my chest. Say something, she said. I folded the paper carefully, mostly to buy myself 2 seconds. Then I said, "You terrify me." One eyebrow lifted. Not the dominant note I was hoping for. I mean because you keep understanding me in ways I didn't authorize. That is slightly better. I stepped closer. The city moved around us. Traffic. Wind. A man in a knit cap pushing a dolly stacked with copy paper into the building next door. Nothing cinematic. Which made what I felt even clearer. Because if something is true on an ordinary sidewalk, it is probably true enough. I don't want a yearly review, I said. I don't want a carefully managed possibility. I don't want to spend the rest of my life acting grateful every time I am not abandoned at a threshold. She didn't move. Didn't interrupt. I want a home with you, I said. I want a drawer that becomes a closet, and a closet that becomes an address, and an address that becomes the place people come for holidays. I want stupid recurring things. Your tea, my suits, your impossible dishwasher standards. I want to know what annoys us at 60. I want to be there when your father pretends not to like my wine choices, and when your mother decides someday that I am actually allowed near her good serving dishes. Her face had gone very still, but her eyes were shining now. And because I had come this far, because at some point in the last year I had gotten tired of my own half-protections, I said the last part too. I want to be central, I said. In my own life, in someone else's life, with you. And if that's not what you want, tell me here and I will survive it. But I am not making myself easy to carry anymore. For half a second she just stared at me. Then she made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob, and wholly Simone in its refusal to be prettier than it was. She put one hand over her mouth, lowered it again, and said, I have been trying for 3 weeks to plan a dignified response to this possibility. I blinked. This possibility. You saying something devastatingly sincere outside a municipal building. Very specific concern. I know you. She stepped closer. So close now that I could see the cold in the air between us. I want all of it, she said. The address, the holidays, the recurring annoyances, the boring Tuesdays, the terrifying centrality. I want the life that forms when 2 people stop keeping one shoe by the door. My chest actually hurt. The good kind. The almost unbearable kind. She reached into her coat pocket then and pulled out a small box. Plain. Dark blue. I laughed in disbelief. Did you bring me a ring? Of course I brought you a ring. What did you think this was? An essay. With you it could have been. Open it. Inside was a simple gold band. Clean. Warm. Engraved on the inside. I turned it slightly to catch the light. And there, in tiny letters, were 4 words. Parking was difficult. I looked up so fast she actually smiled. A full smile. Open, mischievous and emotional at once. I debated for a week whether that was absurd, she said. It is absurd. Do you hate it? No. My voice went rough on the word. No, I love it. Good. I swallowed. Then laughed once because the alternative was probably crying on a public sidewalk before 11 in the morning. You really are completely insane! That was established at the beginning. I took the ring out carefully. Held it. Then looked at her. Did you get one for yourself? She nodded. Pulled back her glove. Showed me the matching band already on her hand. Same gold. Same quiet shine. Same inside engraving I would learn later. And because life occasionally offers a moment so precisely shaped, you would reject it as unrealistic if it happened to someone else. I stood there outside the Cook County Clerk's office 1 year after being left there for the 3rd time, and I put a ring on the hand of the woman I had married by accident and loved entirely on purpose. We did go inside. Not for a ceremony, just for a minute. We walked through the lobby together, past the same plastic chairs, past the same counter, and there, unbelievably, was the same clerk. Reading glasses on the beaded chain. Same neutral competence. Same face trained by years of witnessing human bureaucracy at its most intimate and least glamorous. She looked up as we approached. Looked at me. Then at Simone. Then, with the smallest flicker of recognition, said, "You came back." I don't know what expression crossed my face. Probably something insufficiently adult. Because Simone answered, before I could. "Yes," she said. "We meant to." The clerk nodded. Not sentimental. Not prying. Just mildly satisfied on behalf of administrative continuity. "Good," she said. And that was all. Which felt perfect. No speech. No miracle. Just a witness who happened to understand the value of somebody returning with the same folder and a different ending. That night, our families came to dinner. My parents. Paul. Rebecca and her husband. Simone's parents. A few chairs. A private room with low light and decent wine and the kind of food that allows people to feel elegantly emotional without becoming sleepy. Paul gave a toast that began, "A year ago I was concerned my brother had finally suffered some kind of elegant breakdown." Rebecca laughed so hard she had to set down her glass. Paul continued, "Now I think he may simply have skipped a very inefficient part of courtship." My mother made the exact face she makes when she is trying not to laugh at something she has decided a mother should not encourage. Then Paul looked at Simone and added, more quietly, "Thank you for choosing him where he could see it." I had to look away after that, because brothers should not be allowed to land the truth that cleanly in public. Tunde's toast was shorter. He stood, adjusted his glasses, and said, "Some structures begin with plan, others begin with load. You learn what holds by what remains standing." Then he raised his glass. "To what remains standing." Adaiza, who had spent most of the year pretending this whole situation might still be an elaborate stress response, wiped one eye with the back of a finger and immediately looked annoyed with herself. Simone squeezed my knee under the table. Later, after dinner, after hugs and coats and the city's cold wrapping around all of us again, we walked home. Not took a cab. Walked. Because neither of us wanted the day to end too quickly. The streets were bright in that November way. Clear air. Traffic sound traveling farther than it should. Our hands deep in our coat pockets. Then not in our pockets anymore. Held. At one point we stopped at a crosswalk, and I looked at her and had the sudden, dizzying realization that there was no part of the story left. I was waiting to survive before I could begin living it. That may sound simple. It was not simple. It was new. For most of my life I had lived as though the central event were always slightly ahead. The next proof. The next reassurance. The next person deciding whether I would be kept. And there in the middle of downtown, next to a woman with city salt on her boots and a gold band under her glove and a mind sharp enough to split light, I understood something I wish I had known 20 years earlier. Being loved is wonderful. Being chosen is different. Being chosen has weight. It has sequence. It has arrival. It sounds very often like ordinary consistency, like complete sentences. Like someone telling you where they are and then appearing there. Like a person who knows the old wound and does not step around it politely, but walks into it with you and builds something in that exact place. People sometimes ask, when they hear the broad outline now, whether I believe in fate. I never know how to answer that cleanly. Chance, yes. Chance I believe in. A missed threshold. A shared waiting room. 2 ruined mornings colliding hard enough to make a door. But fate, I don't know. What I know is this. A year after the third woman failed to arrive, I stood on the same street in November and learned that the opposite of abandonment is not intensity. It is return. It is the quiet, radical act of someone saying they will come find you at the desk, and then doing exactly that.